In this particular model, technically resource owner is creating policies at the authorization server beforehand so that any future clients can access their information without them having to authorize every single requesting party one by one by one. Is this a fundamental difference between this and OAuth 2.1?
When we started evaluating IAM vendors to fit into DevRel use cases like 4 years back, we knew that we are not going to find a perfect fit. Now, like everyone is talking about agent authentication, agent-to-agent authentication with MCP and agent-to-agent protocols. But I think there's a larger problem to solve too. So whenever you are not sure about something, follow the standards, follow the best practices, and also challenge them.
Hey, welcome to the Scalekit Podcast. I'm Ravi, one of the co-founders of Scalekit. Scalekit is an identity and authentication infrastructure platform for B2B applications. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Prabath Siriwardena, an identity evangelist with more than 15 years of experience building identity and access management infrastructure. Prabath led the development of the open source WSO2 Identity Server, which is used by Fortune 500 companies globally. He has also authored 8 books, including Microservices Security in Action and Advanced API Security. He's also the founder of Silicon Valley IAM user group. Prabath, welcome to our podcast and thanks for joining us.
Hi Ravi, and thanks for having me. Thank you.
Prabath, you have had quite a journey from leading WSO2's identity platform that serves more than 100 million identities globally to now building identity infrastructure at a DevRev company, a modern AI-first kind of a work platform. So how did your whole journey in the IAM space start?
Right, yeah. I think now the identity server supports more than 1 billion identities. I joined WSO2 in 2007. That's when I got into the identity space and started building a product called WSO2 Identity Server. It was called Identity Solution then. And the motivation behind building Identity Server in 2007 was WSO2 is mostly an integration company, like heavily integration driven company. And in 2005, 2007, the company was founded in 2005. It was a time where SOAP, the web service standards, XML, they were very popular. And WSO2 played a major role in building a web service stack, open source web service stack. And we were doing interrupt testing with Microsoft. So we built WSO2 and mostly like Sri Lankans, they were like one of the leading contributors to the Apache Access 2 project, which was a SOAP engine released under Apache 2 license. And we contributed to the security module of Apache Access 2, which is Apache Rampart. And it was an implementation of some of the web service standards like WS Trust, WS Security and WS Secure Conversation. We were doing interrupt testing with Microsoft. So Microsoft built the .NET stack and we built the Java stack. And while we were doing interrupt testing, they came up with a standard called, open standard called information cards or a card space. That's, once again, you can call it as like, it facilitates single sign-on, but the major focus is mostly on phishing resistant authentication. That's what information cards want to do. Somehow it didn't like become that popular, but we were like, since we already had this web service security stack and information card was built on WS Trust, WS Secure Conversation, it was, easy for us to build a Java stack to do interrupt testing with Microsoft. So that's how the identity solution OneNo got started in 2007. It is a very simple solution that you just download the product and you can simply download InfoCard, which will interact with Microsoft. So that's how it got started. Then we started to see the challenges in this field. And also it was a time, there was a lot of focus on web single sign-on. Actually, that 2005 is the year we saw a lot of prominent standards started to adapt. SAML, from Oasis, SAML to WebSSO, then from OpenID Foundation, OpenID, not OpenID Connect, but OpenID.
Yeah, correct.
And the information card by Microsoft. A lot of standards started to get adapted, and Identity Server, we started building those standards into the product. So that's how my journey got started, and also how we started with WSO2 Identity Solution, and then it was later renamed to WSO2 Identity Server.
It's actually very interesting, Prabath. You spoke about the journey. You started the WSO2 Identity Server before even OAuth. I don't know if it was introduced by the time or not, but now we almost treat OAuth like a standard way of exchanging information between three different parties, right? One is an authorization server, resource server, and resource owner and a client. So it's very interesting how the identity space itself has evolved over the last 2 decades, if you look at it, right? Now, the world itself has changed a lot in the last 20 years since, maybe your journey with identity in WSO2 started. And now things have progressed a lot in terms of how the standards have grown from OAuth 2.1 now and OIDC. During 2010s, API economy has bloomed. Everyone has built APIs and then said, hey, use my APIs to get whatever you want. And now AI agents are everywhere. Now, what do you think has been the most challenging shift or even most interesting shift or surprising shift in the identity landscape over these years?
Right, yeah. So if you look at how the IAM field evolved over last 18 years in the IAM field, but even before that, so you have a real problem to address. For example, the access delegation problem, right? So before 2006, the way people solved the access delegation problem was with credential sharing. You may not probably recall, but if you use the internet web in before 2006, 2005, I had some screenshots too. When you won't publish your slide share to your blog, slide share simply use the blogger username and password, access the blogger API and publish it. So that's how it worked. And they put a notice saying it's safe to share your credentials with us. So it's a very common pattern. Even Yahoo, as soon as you created account with those service providers, they asked your email username and password so they can access your address book and send invitations, right? So that is how they started using that. Then people identified, of course it is problematic, right? So you want to share let's say your Google credentials with SlideShare. That won't work. People won't like that. So then people started building their own ways. Flickr came up with something called Flickr OAuth. Yahoo came up with something called Yahoo Browser-Based Authentication or BBOauth. Then Google came up with something called Google OAuth Sub. So all tried to access the same problem of access delegation. And now the issue is there are multiple solutions to the same problem. So then there's a challenge in interoperability. That's how people start to think about standards. Even in 1995, one of the very first standards on the web for single sign-on was Passport, Microsoft Passport, right? But it was not an open standard, and it didn't got that adapted. And in around 2007, the community came up with the OAuth standard, right? So that's the very first standard, the open standard for access delegation. Then it was donated to the IETF Foundation. I think around 2009, 2010, the OAuth 1.0 RFC was released. You face the problem, different people start building solutions. Then they want to think about interoperability, then go to a standard body and they try to standardize it. So that's how the IAM field evolved. We see the same journey happen in multiple areas: access delegation, web single sign-on, then identity provisioning, then also fine-grained access control. There are different standard bodies. So they all worked on building standards. And these are very active field, especially the IETF OAuth working group and related working groups. They have done a lot to make OAuth prominent standard that will address real problems, enterprise-ready problems, right?
Yeah.
So that's how it evolved. Standard is one side of the story. So then again, even at the early stage of WSO2 Identity Server, we focused very much on standards. And for some time, that was our competitive advantage too. Whenever we get an RFP from a customer, they were asking whether you support SAML 2.0 and OAuth 2.0. Then some OAuth grant type, like SAML 2.0 grant type for OAuth, JWT grant type for OAuth, then SCIM, SACML. So we kept adding that. But as time evolves and as the IAM field getting more matured, all the IAM vendors, they added all these standards, right? So now having support for a standard didn't give any competitive advantage to that particular vendor, right?
Yeah.
So that's one changing point. Ian Glazer, at that time, was a VP of Salesforce in the identity side. So he did this nice talk at EIC where he highlighted it's the TCP/IP moment in identity.
Yeah.
So what does that really mean is in 70s or early 80s. So when TCP/IP got widely adapted, people worried about whether a product supports TCP/IP or not. Right? So when you buy a product, when you purchase a product, you check whether it supports TCP/IP stack. But now when we purchase an application, we never even talk about TCP/IP because it's given. All the products do support the TCP/IP stack. So Ian Glaser argued at that point, now it's a TCP/IP moment in identity because just like the TCP/IP stack, all the products do support all the open standards. So they are not giving any competitive advantage, and it doesn't like make any sense even advertise those things on website. So I remember like around 2010, 2014, even the WSO2 Identity Server website, we had to put all the names of the standards. Not just us, everyone did that, right? Because that was the one helped them to build a competitive advantage. But it is not no more. So that's one point. Like IAM products, like they didn't get any competitive advantage by building these standards. Then what is next? How do you like build competitive advantage on top of those standards? That's the experience. How do you build a better experience for all the stakeholders, not just for developers, but most of the products, they start building it for developers, then for product managers, and even for the customers later. Yeah. So that's one changing point is a TCP/IP moment. The other one is, I would call it the next TCP/IP moment. That is, I don't think we are still there to make the product developer focus, where developers still doesn't need to worry about the identity integrations. Like if you take today, if you're a developer, when you build something, you don't need to worry about the TCP/IP stack. Yeah. You have the right SDKs, you know what to do. You just focus on your application logic. But that's not the reality in the identity domain. Yeah. Even at DevRev, when we are building an app today, they are aware that we are doing OpenID Connect. They would need to know about the access token, the refresh token, where to store that refresh token, what are the best practices in that. So they are still not well abstracted into SDKs. I think we'll get there. But yeah, so that's what I would call like next TCP/IP moment in identity.
Very interesting, Prabath. So I picked up two things. One, you said, yes, the standards have evolved and most of the IAM vendors already packed with all the possible standard support out there. But there are still product engineering teams building identity and authentication in-house for the products that they're building to sell to their customers rather than adopting one of these vendors out there. Why do you think they're still building it in-house?
Right. I think, yeah, very interesting question. So there are multiple aspects in an IAM product. One is a standards. Standards define like how you transport assertions from one place to another place or decisions from one place to another place. So if you take SAML, for example, you will transport authentication assertions, authorization assertions, and attributes.
Right.
Same for OpenID Connect scheme like that. So it will mostly make the systems interoperable. Authentication, single sign-on, the identity federation, that's one aspect of the IAM product. But mostly the complexity comes not from that. Complexity comes from how the object model followed by that IAM product, especially with respect to users, groups, roles, and organizations, right? Especially in a multi-tenant deployment. I can give some good example from DevRev. So when we were building the identity layer at DevRev, so one thing we were to do was we didn't want to build any of these authentication protocols. And also we did like FIDO, OTP, TOTP, we didn't want to build that. It's been there for a while and they are pretty much matured and they are not very much related to our business logic or the business we are doing. Yeah. And also we didn't want to build any of these transport protocols like SAML, OpenID Connect. But we wanted to get control over the object model, right? How the tenants are organized, how the groups are organized, how the users are organized, the relationship between them. So because of that, we actually wanted to build that in our side. And from the identity provider, only thing we expected was tell us who this user is. Once you know who the user is, so that will include that for that part, the IDP would authenticate the user, outbound federate, do whatever they want, then tell us who the user is. And contract between us and the IDPs or OpenID Connect. So IDP may use SAML, OpenID Connect or other federation protocols to connect to the home IDP of the user, but we'll know who the user is. So after that, we can map that user to our object model.
Yeah.
The issue is not just at DevRev, even while I was at WSO2, what I found was, especially in the CIAM use cases, so CIAM has a scale to millions of customers and some use cases are bit complex and specific to that particular business, right? So in a way that they can get the competitive advantage over their competitors. So for example, WSO2 Identity Server is an open source product. So if they totally rely on Identity Server to manage their identity aspect, any of their competitors can do that too. So in most of the time, that would mean all of their competitors following almost similar kind of an identity model, right? It is not optimized to their use cases, but most of the companies, they would keen on building this identity layer themselves. So one is to have the control. The other one is also being a startup, which like evolves very fast. If we rely on an IDP to dictate our object model, whenever we want to do a change there, we need to go by their deadlines. Because of that, we decided we'll build that feature internally and make this identity layer thing. So same thing I found at WSO2 too. So people willing to extend the product if it is specific to authentication federation flows, but not related to object model. I can give another example. So we met a San Francisco based company. They were using some product and they have extended that product to address their use cases. So they have like developed code, extensions and deployed in that vendor product. And they said 80% of the code running in that product is written by their developers, but still they have to pay for that particular company. So they got coupled into the IAM product. So that is one thing I would even advise today. Try to see how you can decouple the identity layer from your business logic.
So Prabath, if I understand right, what you're saying is, hey, if you are a product engineering leader, don't build the identity aspects of it. Of course, you would want to keep the business logic very, very close to your product, but don't implement what these IAM vendors are good at, which is implementing standards like OAuth or SAML or OIDC. Leave that to them, but then focus on keeping your business logic in-house and as close to your systems as possible so that you have as much flexibility as possible.
That's right. Yeah. That's why I see like you won't, like when we started evaluating IAM vendors to fit into DevRev use cases like 4 years back, we knew that we are not going to find a perfect fit. I think it is safe it's really hard to find a perfect fit unless your use cases are very straightforward, right? Let's say log into a web app like that, it's fine. But when you are building some complex use cases, when you are like solving real enterprise problems, you may not find a perfect fit. So that's why you need to define what you expect, like functional requirements and non-functional requirements you expect from IAM vendor. Then probably you'll end up building an identity layer your side, which you need to wrap all the IAM features provided by the IDP and expose your layer to the rest of the like downstream services. So that's what we did at DevRev.
One interesting question that I have following what you said is, you spoke about identity and leaving the resolution of the identity of the actor to a third-party vendor and then taking the business cases or use cases or business logic as close to the system as possible. Now, when it comes to identity itself, the definition of who the user is or what the identity of the user is changing drastically, right? Previously, most of the identity used to be around users and humans, but now there are AI agents which are acting on behalf of a user. Now, how do you think the whole CAM space is actually, not just CAM space, how do you think the standards itself are evolving to solve this particular problem?
Right. So we have multiple kind of users. So as you said, so human user who will directly interact with the system, and there can be an application who's accessing services just by being itself or on behalf of a user or another application. So those are the common access patterns we see. And if you take OAuth, for example, OAuth2O RFC decouples the authorization server from the resource server. Resource server is where your services are, right? And then you have the client, which is the app. It can be a web app, SPA, or a mobile app, any kind of an app. Then the user who owns the resources. That's a resource owner. So your application in OAuth, we represent as a client ID, is accessing a resource on behalf of the resource owner. So that's what OAuth did. Then UMA2O, User Managed Access 2O, it went a step beyond that. It not just decoupled the resource server from the authorization server, it also decoupled the user. So I'll give an example, right? In addition to the client, UMA also introduced another entity called requesting party. A requesting party can access a resource where a client on behalf of a resource owner, right? I'll give an example. So let's say you have multiple bank accounts in different banks, right? So your bank account is a resource. You can think about each bank is a resource server, right? So now let's assume there's an authorization server which all these banks do trust, right? And I trust that authorization server too.
Yeah.
Right. Ideally, I'll be like, it's a very decentralized model. I can pick this authorization server, right? Then I will introduce all my banks to this authorization server. So Chase, Bank of America, other banks, I introduce my account to this authorization server. Then I define a policy there which says who can access, who has which level of access to my bank accounts, who has access to my savings account, who has access to read-write access to my checking accounts. All these access policies I define in this authorization server. There are financial managers, advisors who would need to manage my accounts. So they'll be using finance management app, something like that. And the finance manager will log into that app and they need to get access to my accounts. In this case, the finance manager is a requesting party. Now, when the finance manager, via the finance management app, wants to access my Chase account, so it'll, as per the UMA protocol, it will request access to my Chase account. Then looking at the request, it finds out it doesn't have a proper valid token, and it will check the attached authorization server to Chase account under my account, and it will send that information to the finance management app. If you want to access this, get a token from this authorization server. So now the finance management app will redirect the finance manager to that authorization server. So he needs to authenticate the trust between those two. If that is done, then it will evaluate the policies that I have set up over my account. So it will evaluate, finds okay, it's good, and it will issue a token, FOB token, to the finance app for that particular requester, finance manager, to access my Chase account on behalf of me. So that's another level. So you can also think about, it is applicable to agent scenarios too, to some extent. You can think about the finance manager as an agent.
Yeah. So Prabhat, if I understand right, so in this particular model, technically resource owner is creating policies at the authorization server beforehand so that any future clients can access their information without them having to authorize every single requesting party one by one. Is this a fundamental difference between this and OAuth 2.1?
That's yes. So that's what UMA introduced. So that's the value UMA adds on top of OAuth 2, and it's an OAuth 2 profile. But once again, that didn't get adapted. Like those days, UMA was mostly placed for IoT scenarios.
Okay.
Right. So when we want to give access to IoT devices to perform certain tasks, major reason is none of the top vendors, top companies, they didn't support UMA. Like Google, Microsoft, Salesforce, that's why it didn't get adapted. But I think when we are building now, like everyone is talking about agent authentication, agent-to-agent authentication with MCP and agent-to-agent protocols. And I think it's good time. It doesn't necessarily need to be UMA, but there are things you can learn from UMA, because some of the use cases UMA addressed that time are very much related to what we see in the agent-to-agent authentication domain. Now look at UMA and learn from the UMA specs, and then see how we can evolve OAuth 2.0 to fit into the agentic flows.
Yeah, very interesting. So Prabhat, two follow-up questions from that. One is, see, you mentioned about MCP and how MCP has recently mentioned that if you're building a remote MCP server, you need to follow OAuth 2.1 standards and all that. So I know OAuth is a collection of various proposals brought together to solve different problems. But do you think all these different protocols together in their current form today are enough to solve the ephemeral constant access problems that AA agents and MCP clients and MCP servers pose? Do you think they are enough as is in their current format, or do you foresee any future additions to the OAuth standard protocols to solve some of these challenges?
Yeah. So OAuth 2.1, once again, it's OAuth 2.0 plus some of the RFCs built around that to make it better.
Yeah.
So OAuth 2.1 would be the foundational standard. Whenever MCP client wants to talk to MCP server, so you can pass an OAuth 2.1 token, and then an end user can follow an OpenID Connect flow and introduce an OAuth server to the OAuth client.
Yep.
But I think there's a larger problem to solve too, like how, especially, I mean, the challenge here is we need to think about a highly decentralized setup. So we need to think about how to build trust between highly decentralized setup. So that would be the challenge. And I see there are multiple efforts going on in the IETF working group and also some of the working groups in OpenID Foundation to understand this problem and come up with standards. But once again, if you look at how the standards evolve, people will come up with their own solutions. People will build their own solutions. They may not interrupt with each other, but when you find a problem, you don't necessarily need to wait for a standard. You need to try to fix it and solve it. People will do that. Then the way it happens is you solve it. Then they bring their solution to these standard bodies. Then they make it part of the standard with the feedback from everyone. So I think, so there are now everyone is talking about this one. That's a good thing. But when everyone is going to adapt this for real, like agents, then they'll face this problem. Probably like specific solution, those use cases will come up, and then those will help to build the standards. I think this is a very interesting, but once again, evolving field.
So Prabhat, you also contributed to some of the RFCs to the OAuth itself. So I want to understand what is the process. Like if as an engineer, I have identified a clever solution to a problem, but that is not standardized yet, and I want to help contribute RFC so that this solution can be adopted by as many companies as possible and help create a better world. How does one go about this process? How does one contribute, or how does one become part of this group, working group?
Yeah. So it's an open working group. So the very first thing you can do is you can there are multiple working groups under IETF Foundation related to OAuth. So one is OAuth working group itself. So there's another working group called HUSE working group, which is focusing on this JWT, JWE, JWS.
Yeah.
The very first thing you can do is subscribe to their mailing list and start listening to their discussions. And they also do have weekly or bi-weekly meetings. So you can attend to those. You need to sign some agreement. Even as an individual, you can do that. You can attend those meetings and start to learn how things happening, how standards evolve. And also most of these working group members, they do meet at some of the conferences. Like one is the Internet Identity Workshop. It happens twice every year at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View. And European Identity Conference, EIC, also these members do meet. And there you can go there and talk to them. And if you have any ideas, you can present to them. Basically get used to the process first and understand these standards, areas that you want to contribute, what work has been done. And then if you want to contribute an existing one, if you go to one of these working groups and if you look at the documents, you can see the proposed one, drafts one, standardized one. You can see those stuff, read that. So if you think you have ideas for anything ongoing, you can contribute to that. Right? You just need to subscribe to mailing group. If you can make a valuable contribution, so either you can be a contributor, or if you have very fresh idea, then again you can present a draft proposal, right? You've been an editor. Just putting a proposal to a working group is not enough. You need to show that this is a real problem. You need other people from different companies. They also need to put some weight saying this is a real problem. We have faced that. And also we need to have some vendors or the implementers saying, okay, we are fine to support that. And then that will start building a discussion around that. That's one way to get started.
So, Prabhat, after listening to what you just said, I now realized how much of an effort goes into creating a final published RFC. That means a lot of thought across experts across different companies goes into evaluating different conditions and different practical use cases and scenarios to come up with a final version of any RFC. So more often than not, it is better to use an existing standard that is ratified and published rather than reinventing your own standards, because an RFC that is vetted and reviewed by so many of the experts would have gone through some serious security scrutiny.
Exactly. Yes. That's the benefit. Yeah. Right. I mean, you are to the point in that case. It's not just the interoperability. Interoperability is one benefit of standard. So we are following a standard means you are following a best practice, a set of best practices defined by a set of people who have lived in this domain for a long time and been vetted well across multiple companies, across many customers. Yeah, so that's the other major benefit. Yeah.
Interesting. So, Prabath, you also wrote a lot of books, right? So, first of all, what drove you into writing these books?
Right. Yeah, I started first writing a blog.
Okay.
WSO2 was most focused on integration side. We didn't actually even have much budget, like for the IAM identity product early days. So we used to write a lot of blogs.
Okay.
So we had a small team too, like a 4-people team. Now I think it's more than 100. Those days, 4-5 people team, very small team. So we started write blogs. So 1 year we wrote 300 plus blogs.
Almost one a day.
One a day, yeah. But team, like 4 people, not just me, like team. Yeah, every day we publish a blog. And that's how people got to know about us, right? And then again, writing a blog is not just about you want others to read. I think more than others benefiting from your blog, you benefit a lot, because the best way to learn something is to write. When you write things, it cannot be just random thoughts. When you start writing, it has to follow a nice flow. And when you're writing, you would understand the gaps you have, right? Then you will start to research more on that, and then you will learn a lot from that. So mostly when I want to write something, if I had to pick a topic to write something, I would pick a topic that I don't know. So that helps me to learn about that. So that's how I got started with most of these books. My desire was to write any book. So I reached out to multiple publishers, and they didn't accept my proposal. And one publisher said, "Okay, can you write a book on ForgeRock?"
Okay.
Right? ForgeRock IAM. But at that point, I was working at WSO2, so I didn't want to do that. So then I wrote a book on ESB. It's not my domain. I was not in the ESB team even. It's, ESB Enterprise Service Bus, right? Yeah. So I was not even in that team, but it helped me to learn ESB and wrote that book. It was they only gave me to write a 40-page book. 40-page book, so they had a limit. So I wrote that like receipt kind of a book. So that's how I got started. Yeah. So then after that, I wrote a few books on API security, Microservices security, and I've been writing a book on OpenID Connect for a while, like maybe more than 5 years now. I completed all 10 chapters, but somehow we had some disagreement with the publisher, and so we just stopped. But I'm still working on it. I'm trying to publish it in self-publish that book. Yeah. So that's how it got started.
It's a very interesting point that you mentioned, where you're not writing just to tell a story to others, but you're also trying to learn something through the process of writing something down for your own benefit. So what is the next book that you're writing, Prabath?
Yeah, that's the OpenID Connect book. I mean, that's the one I'm working on. I hope I'll be able to finish it this year and publish it. I can give another example, the Silicon Valley IAM user group, right? So I founded that. WSO2 is sponsoring that. So even when I try to pick a topic for that, I pick a topic that I can learn. I want to learn more. So that gives me access to the top experts in that domain. So let's say I want to learn about SPIFFE, right? So then I invite the founder of that company to do a session on SPIFFE. Same for OPA. So then I had direct access to those founders. So then that gave me the opportunity to learn, not just for me, but all our community members too.
Yeah. So you spoke about really two different, I don't know if it is technology, framework, standards, specifications, whatever you want to call them, SPIFFE and OPA. So can you talk a little bit more about SPIFFE, OPA, OAuth2 coming together to solve identity, authentication, authorization, and access management in the context of agents and AI applications?
Right. SPIFFE is mostly for the system authentication. It helps to bootstrap trust in a given system. Like let's say if you have a microservices deployment, right? So when you spin up a microservice in your cluster, it doesn't have identity first. So it'll bootstrap identity to that particular service by talking to a SPIFFE agent and then to a SPIFFE server, and get either a certificate or a JWT assigned to that particular service. So that is the fundamental of SPIFFE. It's mostly used for service interactions.
Correct.
So then OPA is for access control. So OPA can be used to access control at multiple layers. It can be used like even in SPIFFE scenario, right? You can use OPA. Like when microservice spins up, when it requests identity from the Spire server, Spire is one of the SPIFFE implementations. It has to go to some policy. So that policy can be defined as an OPA policy. And even when one microservice talks to another microservice, there can be a policy agent, OPA policy agent running, which intercepts all the requests and see whether this service is allowed to access this service. So that is mostly for the service interactions. Then comes OpenID Connect and OAuth. OpenID Connect is the identity layer. It will tell you who the user is. It won't tell you who the user is, right? I mean, maybe we are deviating a little bit, but I'll tell you the one example. So Facebook didn't use OpenID Connect for a long time. I'm not sure they're even using it now. It used OAuth2O, right?
Yeah.
So let's say when someone wants to log into an app, you log in with Facebook, right? But when you log in with Facebook, it uses OAuth2O, but then app finds out who you are. How does that happen if OAuth2O is not about identity? So that's a workaround. So what happens is, it's the OAuth flow. You get a token, you give a token to the app, and the app uses that token to access a Facebook API, I think profile/me-some API. With that token, it will tell you who the user is. So that's a workaround built on top of OAuth2O to solve this identity problem, but that's what was standardized with OpenID Connect later. So now you authenticate with an authorization OpenID Connect server, you log into the app. Now app has an OAuth token, which is good enough to access your resources. So now let's say if you think about a microservices deployment, so you access a resource with this token, then you will have like gateway kind of thing, which intercepts the request, validates the token. And then when gateway wants to access a microservice, like forward this request to another microservice, that request should carry both the service identity, which can be defined using SPIFFE, and also the identity of the end user.
Yeah.
Right. That request will carry the service identity and the user identity. And the upstream service, it will validate the service identity and it will also validate the user identity. Most of the people use JWT now, self-contained tokens. And then it can use OPA once again to see whether one is, can this service access it? Can this user access this resource? So, or any other combinations. So that's how like you can get OPA, SPIFFE, OAuth, OpenID Connect things together in like probably a microservice environment.
Yeah, very interesting, Prabath. So just to summarize, you would use OpenID or OAuth to grant tokens to a third-party application, and then once it lands on your either gateway or an edge where it is intercepting the token, and then that will determine how to get subsequent service tokens to talk to different internal microservices. And the external world can be a human, or it can be an AI agent. It can be any third-party application that wants to act on behalf of a user. But the combination of OAuth and OpenID can be used to create a token for this third-party application. And the combination of using SPIFFE and OPA, you can secure your internal microservices in a better fashion.
Right. Yes.
Very interesting. I think, Prabhat, I have one recommendation. I think the next book you should write about is identity and authentication in the world of AI agents. That is in serious need of the hour right now.
Yeah, I've started writing some blogs. So I published one yesterday because everyone is talking about the IAM for agents.
Yeah.
Like how you authenticate, authorize agents. That's one aspect. The other aspect is the agentic IAM. So agentic IAM is how you use these AI agents to enhance the user experience. Like IAM itself will act as agents. I put some examples that I can go through like one example. Let's say a product manager, right? So now product manager wants to do some like A/B testing. They want to capture the phone number during the sign up, right? You capture the phone number, validate, right? And store it and then see the numbers. Like probably you say, okay, deploy this to 10% of the users, right? Then you see how it goes. You have to look up the acceptance rate, right? So now let's say your acceptance rate is going down. Then what would you do? You may introduce a skip button. You don't make it mandatory, but for that 10% skip button. Okay, so now you have to monitor the acceptance rate. Okay, now you see it is going up. Okay, now let's say 30%. You deployed to more users. And you probably analyze it's on the geography. What's the acceptance rate, right? So now all these are manually done. But in the agentic IAM, what I would expect is The product manager will tell, I need to capture the phone number and probably give an acceptance rate, something like that. And then entire experiment will be designed by the agent itself. It will evaluate the progress. Then it will take the next step. So intent is set by the PM, say, I don't want the sign up to be dropped by 10% or something like that. So the agent will design the experiment to get to that goal. So there can be multiple examples like that where we can use AI to improve the CIM experience.
But Prabhat, I have one question though.
Yeah.
The way everyone is building agents nowadays, don't you think the login and sign up should be optimized for agents rather than humans? And if so, I'm assuming the whole CIM world itself will drastically change from how they're focused on human-centric identity and authentication towards agent-centric identity and authentication.
Yeah. I think we won't be able to totally get out of the humans. But yes, like as you said, so when we have like agents for everything, it becomes a specific area, right? So how you like delegate human access to agents to access resources on behalf of you. So that's the problem we need to solve. And then this identity can propagate from one agent to another agent. So I think those are the challenging things we need to solve, and those are for sure is beyond all-in-one. So that's why I think, people like getting together now to solve this like the major problem.
Yeah. Prabhat, one last question. What would be the one advice that you would give to architects and engineering leaders today about security and identity and authentication while they're busy building their products for scale and AI?
Right. Yeah. So one thing is so whenever you are not sure about something, follow the standards, follow the best practices, and also challenge them. Like the way things evolve only when you challenge those stuff. So for example, like someone would say you should use SPIFFE with OAuth2, with OpenID Connect, right? But you should challenge. You shouldn't just accept it. That's a best practice. Why it's a best practice? You should challenge what's the problem it is solving. Then rather ignoring it, start with it and start challenging it. Then see how you can optimize it. Like what I feel is as you said too, standards go beyond interoperability, define a set of best practices. But the way best practices are not forever, right? So best practices are defined under one context. Best practices need to evolve too, but best practices will evolve only when you start questioning. And also, like you don't need to 100% believe in standards, right? You can start with standards, but if you think this standard doesn't address my problem, it is totally fine to experiment, build something beyond that. You need to start with that, and you need to discuss, brainstorm why it is not fit your use case. Probably you can discuss this with the standard groups too. Right?
Yeah.
Then start building something that you think which will address your use case, and take it to standard bodies, get more feedback, and make it a standard. So always be open-minded. There are no strict rules. You start with best practices, question them, and then move forward. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Prabhat. This is really, really great. Thank you so much for all your advice and all your insights and experiences that you gained over the years. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ravi. Thank you for having me.